Recording.
Can I say something before Tim start to introduce you? You have such a beautiful voice.
Oh, thank you.
Such a deep voice. I'm already in another state of mind already.
I didn't think I had a very deep voice.
No, he hasn't got a deep voice.
That's
Ignore
not
his
deep.
French. No.
God, I was making you a compliment. Fine. I'm taking back my compliment. Can you start, Tim?
British
Yes,
people don't
okay.
accept compliments.
No. Hi, everybody. Today we are joined, and Olivier always gives that laugh when I say everybody.
What is this introduction? Hi, everybody. What's the most ridiculous thing that you've said so far? Hi, everybody.
Is it really? We're like a minute in and you're fucking abusing me already. Okay. Today we have on the show Bodhipaksa. I'm going to let him tell you what he does in a little bit more detail, but I've got to tell you the story of how I got to know him. So this is about 7 or 8 years ago, and I wanted to start doing meditation. And I went to Amazon, I was searching on Amazon, I thought, Bodhipaksa, that sounds a cool name, and it was
Can I interrupt? It's
Yes,
just that it's
please.
pronounced Bodhipaksa, not Pashka. Paksha.
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 So are you telling me for 8 years I've been getting your name wrong? And you've never pointed it out before?
Apparently so.
Backshot.
Yes.
It's hard to get a word in edgeways sometimes, Tim.
I have never felt embarrassed on one of these podcasts before. Actually, no, I don't now. Okay, I'm just going to call you Body if that's all right, like everybody else does. Okay, so I went and bought one of Body's CDs.
You look nervous, man.
I'm not nervous. Got it back, put it on, went to do the meditation, and then I heard this ridiculous, in the context, so I'm going to explain what I mean, ridiculous accent. So I was expecting a name like that, I don't know, maybe Vietnamese or Indian, whatever, I don't know. I expected this sort of mysterious voice. Then I got this gentle, soft Scottish accent, which is still my favourite voice. Yeah, I still do guided meditations from time to time. And without doubt, and I've listened to dozens and dozens, and with possible exception of Jack Cornfield, I also really like, he's got the greatest voice for meditation. So what bigger lead-in, what bigger compliment can I pay than that? He's no good at it, but his voice is fantastic.
I said it before, by the way.
I know, yeah.
Said no.
Olivier said it before. But you said he got a deep voice.
I didn't
before
to
he
say
It's not a
started.
deep voice.
No, it's not.
You may have said
gentle.
soft. You said deep, and I don't think I have
Yeah.
a particularly deep voice.
But you have a gentle voice. You have a perfect meditator. You'd have made a great hypnotherapist. But anyway, so I'm not gonna trash anything else. You tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing up there in New Hampshire.
Okay. I kind of feel like I should put on an Indian accent or something and say that that's my real accent and that the Scottish accent is just a fake.
We actually haven't offended any Indians yet on the podcast, so if you could do that, that would be great.
I'll see what I can do. Right. So I'm from Scotland originally. I grew up in a little town in kind of more or less the middle of nowhere. When I was kind of interested in meditation and Buddhism when I was in high school, but couldn't find out a lot about it, partly because there was just nothing near me at all. I would have had to travel about 35 miles, which in Scottish terms is the other end of the world. And I was a teenager, didn't have access to a car or anything. So it wasn't until I went to university that I came across an actual live Buddhist group who were teaching meditations, and I got instantly hooked. Not that I was a great meditator or had any fantastic experiences, but it just made sense. And so I've just kept doing it since then. Now I teach meditation pretty much full time. most of what I do is writing, actually, plus recording guided meditations. I do a lot of online events.
You mentioned something, body, and I won't attempt to pronounce your name as well because I'm the worst at that. Even worse than Tim.
I don't think so. You have an excuse. I've known the guy.
Remember the Eckhart Tolle thing?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we had this. No, we had this whole thing, and I hadn't got a clue. He's talking to the guest, and he got. How do you say it?
I say Eckhart Tolle or something. I don't remember.
And he didn't even say it that well. So I'm on Google trying to find out who the fuck they're talking about, these two people, because obviously the other guy knew because they'd read the same book or whatever. And I'm like thinking that it can't. Why are they talking about the power now? Was that co-written by somebody else? Rather, so I'm on Amazon while this conversation is going on. So
anyway, so I want to try to pronounce your name, the full name. So Bodhi, you mentioned something interesting. You say it felt right. It felt right. So when you joined that this movement, this Buddhism thing. So what is this? It felt right.
Well, it was more that it kind of made sense to me, really.
Yeah.
I suppose the idea that you can shape your own emotional experience was something that was quite new to me at that time. And I was about 18 the first time I went along to a meditation class. I had a hiatus of a couple of years immediately after that before I went back again. But the very first time I went along, and I learned a practice called the metta bhavana, or development of loving kindness. I began to understand that you can actually shape your own emotional experience, and emotions aren't just something that happens to you like the weather. It's more something that you create, it's something that you cultivate. So that immediately struck me as being quite a radical idea. It wasn't something I'd ever come across anywhere else, and that kind of made perfect sense. And the other meditation practice that I learned was mindfulness of breathing, anapanasati. And basically what you're doing most of the time in mindfulness of breathing is getting distracted, realizing you're getting distracted and going back to your breathing again. But the important thing is, what is it that you're doing when you're off being distracted? I mean, most of the time, to borrow Tim's terminology, it's complete crap. You're away, worrying about something that might happen, or you're having an argument with somebody in your head, which is really weird because you're just sitting there making yourself unhappy and getting yourself into the state of conflict and stress. Or you're telling yourself that you're not particularly good at something. There's just a whole bunch of stuff that we do. All of those activities make us unhappy. So you're just noticing, oh, I'm away again, and you're just coming back to your breathing. And you find out that what happens is that the mind starts to settle down and you become happier. And it's not that happened straight away, but I could see that the principle was sound. And, as it happened over the years, I've found that it works.
Can I just ask you, you said that you got into it originally at high school. How? I wouldn't imagine many Scottish high schools were filled with books on Buddhism in those days.
No, there were hardly any books. I mean, we're talking about the late 70s, and my local library had 2 books on Buddhism. I think there was a couple of things that struck me. Well, first of all, just a bit of background. I was a spiritual seeker. I was interested in religion, and I was interested in philosophy, and I was interested in politics, and basically there was a need in my life for 2 things. One was something that was going to give my life a sense of meaning and purpose, and the other one was something that was going to stop me from suffering so much, because teenage years are really hard, and I went through a particularly difficult period in high school where a lot of my friends left about the same time to go off and do other things, and I felt very isolated, and I found myself hanging out with a bunch of people that I didn't really like that much and who didn't like me, which when you're a teenager is really kind of hard. So I was looking for those 2 things, a sense of meaning, and I was looking for some technique or some approach that was going to help me suffer less. Meditation seemed to be, from what I heard about it, a way of looking for peace or happiness within yourself rather than depending upon the outside world. And it seemed to me that the outside world was at that time, extremely undependable. It wasn't set up in a way that was going to help me be very happy. And the only religious tradition that was available around about me were various forms of Christianity. And I didn't believe in God. I mean, I hadn't believed in God since I was in primary school, elementary school. I decided I was an atheist, maybe about the age of 11 or 12 or something like that. And although I went through a period in my teens of reading the New Testament again and actually finding myself quite inspired by some of the ethical teachings in that, I certainly didn't have any affinity for any of the churches that were around about me, and a lot of the Christians that I was in contact with, let's just say I wasn't terribly impressed by them. So yeah, I was kind of primed to look for something, and I was exploring various things, including politics. I made some contacts in the Young Communist League, for example, in Scotland. Communism was actually quite strong in the part of Scotland that I came from, and that sort of fulfilled. Well, not that I really got into that, but it promised to fulfill, I suppose, the sense of meaning and purpose that I was looking for. But it wasn't going to help with that other thing. So I was really interested in moving toward meditation, finding out more about Buddhism. There were, I think, 1 or 2 books on Buddhism in my local school library. I think maybe there was just one. There was a book by a guy called Christmas Humphreys, of all things, who had been I think he was one of the founders, maybe the founder of the Buddhist Society in London. And he was a judge, he was a high court judge. I think he was actually involved in the Nuremberg trials. And he had a very intellectual approach. I'm not sure whether he really did much in the way of practice. Certainly, one of his books warned Westerners against meditating, because the Western mind, unlike the Eastern mind, which, as we all know, is completely different. Totally,
Absolutely,
they're almost a different species over there. Anyway, the Western mind apparently is not suited to meditating, and he warned people off it. And reading his books, I was kind of intrigued by some of the philosophy of Buddhism, but I would come away from it thinking, okay, but how would my life be different if I was actually practicing as a Buddhist? And I got no sense of that whatsoever. One thing that really did make a difference to my life was another book on religion, which I don't think I even read it. I just dipped into it. It had some photographs inside, and it had this photograph of, I'd have to go back and look at the book, and I don't think I'd ever be able to track it down now. But it had a photograph of a Buddha image. I think it was a painted Buddha image. On a shrine. I think this was one of these huge ones, like a big Tibetan shrine, with all of these candles in front of it. And there was something about that communicated a really deep sense of peace and calm and stillness. And I found that very attractive. I saw a couple of things on TV. I remember there was a documentary about a monastery in England somewhere. It may have been Chithurst. And there were some interviews with some of the monks there, and you saw them going on their alms round. And I had no desire to become a monk particularly, but that was another little point of contact. So there were just various things, and I would come across references to Buddhism and think, yeah, that kind of makes sense. So
I'd love to set the scene here now for anybody who doesn't know, because late 70s, telling somebody like in a pub or whatever you're a Buddhist was probably more like to get you killed than drawn into a conversation. It's not exactly, in England was the same. I mean, I think a lot of people now don't realise how woo-woo it was seen as by most people. It's only sort of, I think, recently, in probably the last 10 years, since all the sort of research has come out and it's become more mainstream. I bet you didn't have to wait to get the book out of the library, did you? I bet you hadn't got loads of stamps on the inside with the date to return by all the other people that had borrowed it.
I do believe you're right, Tim.
Yeah, cool. Well, I was going to say I always am, but that's not true. That's not true at all. So one of the things that really gave me a man crush on you, I think. So the first course, I've got to say, a man crush.
Be still, my beating heart.
Yeah, wow. Exactly. I think it was the second ever class I did with you, and I've probably done a number down a retreat as well. And they're all fantastic, by the way. You sat down and you kicked off and you said, "Oh, I've been stressed this week." And I was like, yes, because it's like just, to me, I swear, I admit on my blog that my life isn't perfect. I've just had literally this week written a letter of apology to somebody who I misjudged completely. And I think when we try, it's like with other life coaches, when they try and pretend their life's perfect and that really, or I can't be a coach until I get it perfect, then I think that just people switch off from it. But when you can say something like that, and it makes a connection. It's like, all right, okay, so even you get stressed. But it's getting the tools so you're aware of that stress and that you can deal with it quicker and more effectively. So in other words, the point I suppose I'm trying to make is, meditation think that, or people often have a tendency to think, my clients, etc., that they're never going to get stressed again. Mm. And it's just not like that.
It's almost, I can't imagine how someone could live their life in such a way that they didn't experience stress. You'd have to not do anything. You'd have to not have a job. Yeah. You'd have to not have any relationships. And those things would themselves be stressful.
Yeah, I guess they would be.
but actually it goes back to this, when you say you try to find a way to avoid suffering, that was one of the purpose that you had, was to find a way to not to suffer, right?
Yeah, to deal with suffering anyway. I certainly wanted to experience less suffering, but I don't think you can't entirely avoid suffering. That's just impossible. As Tim says, it's learning to deal with it is the thing. And learning not to cause yourself suffering unnecessarily, which is one of the things that we do.
But that's so important, actually, because it looks like to me, one of these, everything that you see is what Tim described, is almost this kind of perfect life that doesn't exist, to say, at some stage you won't suffer and everything will be perfect. It seems like these ideas that we have in this modern society is that you need to go there to this, and there's a way to do. But basically what you say is, no, it's not bad. Suffering is part of life, and it's basically how to deal with it, is how to handle it better. It's unavoidable. Is it correct? Or?
Yeah. I mean, I think I had that idea when I first started practicing Buddhism, that I was going to get to some state where, I just wouldn't suffer anymore. But, the more I practice, the more I grow up and realize that that's not possible at all. And you even look at the Buddha, and he obviously dealt with suffering in his life in various levels. Physical pain sometimes, there were reports of him getting injured, getting sick, and also there were things that bugged him. One of them was human moments in all of the Buddhist scriptures, and you've got to remember that the Buddhist scriptures were passed down for hundreds of years by people who had a vested interest in saying, "Look, our teacher's the best. Our teacher's great. Our teacher had this way of dealing with suffering which is better than anybody else's way of suffering." So there's the tendency to plaster over, to cover over any hint that the Buddha was suffering. But anyway, there's this little human story where the Buddha, he's probably about 80 years old at this point, just not long before he died. And he's sitting with his cousin, Ananda, who's almost exactly the same age. And they're watching the sun going down, and it describes how they're enjoying the sensation of the warm sunlight on their bodies. And Ananda says to his cousin, the Buddha, he says, isn't it amazing how, in past days we were so young and we were fit and, healthy and beautiful, and, people would comment on how good looking we were. And the Buddha says, "Yep, I spit on old age."
I was going to ask you about that. I remember you telling that. So, well, I remember being told the story, and I couldn't remember whether it was you or not, and it's just... And that is a brilliant demonstration. That it is, just to bring it back to reality.
Who likes it? Who likes getting old? And who likes experiencing pain?
Crap! You can hear me getting out of bed now, and I don't mean the noise of me just getting out of bed. It's about all my bones and my knees and my whatever. So it sucks getting old. But there you go.
The other thing I've noticed that the Buddha really didn't like was noisy monks. He hated noisy monks. Well, hated isn't the right word, because hate implies hate implies hate. He just didn't like being around noisy monks. He would go away. He would ask them to be quiet, And if they wouldn't be quiet, if there was like, arguing and, frivolous communication going on, he would just go somewhere else. He didn't like it. I think on a visceral level, it was unpleasant. And sometimes the only thing he could do to be able to deal with that visceral unpleasantness of being around the jarring sound of noise was to go off somewhere.
It's just dawned on me that the Buddha wouldn't have liked me. How pushing is that?
Oh, come on, come on.
I'm going to use that in it. Even the Buddha hated me. Yeah. Not hate, but would avoid me.
Yeah. Tim, you just need to learn how to, not to speak. Be silent. Kind of. Yeah.
I can do that. I can do that.
But,
in between words, But I want to ask you. I've got to bring up the fake Buddha stuff because now. So Buddy's got a website called fakebuddhaquotes.com, is it?
That's the one, yep.
We can put, which is awesome because Pinterest is littered with Buddha quotes. And I've got a poster on my wall that says, there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way, the Buddha. And he never said that, did he?
Not as far as we're aware. Certainly.
Which is like, fuck, I want my money back. I don't know what to say. Look, if you're going to sell me something, I just feel silly. I have to explain it to clients when they come in. Look, I know that's not really a real Buddha quote, just in case. I'm not, But on Pinterest, it's just littered with all sorts of, hundreds of them. I daren't repin. I certainly daren't put something on Google Plus with the fact that the Buddha said without copying this guy in and saying, please tell me if this is right or wrong, because I hate giving bad information.
The fake Buddha quotes are far more popular for some reason. The Buddha wasn't particularly quotable. I mentioned that the Buddhist scriptures were passed down. We'll call them scriptures, which suggest something written down. But for the first few hundred years, they were passed down by word of mouth. And they developed a very kind of, repetitive, kind of, wordy kind of approach. And the Buddha tended, or what's been passed down to us, it tends to not be very quotable, unfortunately. But some people seem to be preferentially drawn to the fake Buddha quotes. It's quite amazing. You'll get all of these lists of, the 25 best Buddha quotes that will change your life, and you'll find that...
Which you said 2.
You'll find that like 9 of them, 90% of them, 95% of them are completely fake.
Well, it should be 25 quotes that if the Buddha had have said would have changed your life, and you cover all bases. But it's, sites like Pinterest, though, have given people carte blanche. I've seen... people take quotes, even things like the sort of fake Buddha quote, change just a little bit and then put their own name to it, on one of these free sites, then put it up. And it's just like, it just drives me up the fucking wall. Honestly, I've got no tolerance for things like that at all. If I was there, I actually said to Buddy one time, you ought to see if you can get the domain name The Angry Buddhist, and then you can post all the shit you're really annoyed about. But there is already an Angry Buddhist who'd taken that.
I'm really pissed off about that.
Yeah, you're angry about the Angry Buddhist. So, what's happening with you? Were writing a book. So you wrote a book, Living Like a River. Tell me, it is Living Like a River, isn't it?
Living as a River.
As a river. Yeah, there you go. And then you started doing another one, and there was a few emails and what have you, and then it kind of stopped. What happened?
Well, nothing has not happened exactly. What I've done is over the last couple of years, I've done quite a few online events, and I've done a lot of writing for that. I did one event called 100 Days of Loving Kindness, and then I repeated that the next year, which gave me a chance to refine that material and rework it. And I'm doing it again this year, but I'm doing it as 4 separate events rather than one big event. And that material is currently with an editor who I haven't heard from for a little while. So I'm going to have to, as soon as I get off this podcast, send her a quick email and find out what's happening.
There you go.
But yeah, so I've got that. And I've also written a bunch of other material as well. We did another meditation last year. It was a 60-day program in cultivating what's called jhana, or dhyana in Sanskrit. And what dhyana is, it's a sort of flow state in meditation where you've successfully got to the point where you've stopped thinking about a bunch of crap And so by not thinking about the bunch of crap, you're actually starting to feel kind of happy. And then you're just happy sitting there being happy. And that keeps you in the flow state. You're just absorbed in noticing your own experience and being happy about being happy. It's really cool. So it's about how to help that come about.
Can you go a bit more into that? Because there's obviously there's other stages of the jhana factors. Would you mind explaining them?
That was one of my questions, actually. So how many meditation do you need in order to get there?
Oh, well, just
17.
78.
17.
72.
Yeah.
It varies enormously. I mean, some people will experience this the very first time they sit down to meditate because they haven't learned how not to meditate yet. It's like they've done a kind of like ninja surprise move on their mind, and they haven't mobilized the forces of resistance yet, and so they sit down to meditate, and just for some reason they just wow, this is fantastic. Anyway, but there's a lot of preparatory work you might have to do. In noticing what's going on in the mind in more detail, getting better at spotting your distractions, learning the different kinds of distractions you have. Like, for example, you might notice that your tendency is to be irritable, or your tendency is to worry about things. And then there's various techniques that you can use which will help you to combat, as it were, those particular kinds of distractions and calm yourself down. But I see basically three major areas for working on for developing this state of jhana. One is calming down the mind, slowing down the mind so that your thinking is less continuous and less disruptive. You can do that by becoming more aware of the body in particular. That can have a big effect. And as I mentioned, there's various techniques that you can use that help you calm your mind down. Just to take one example, it's not really possible to it's not possible at all actually to really listen to what's going on around about you and also listen to what's going on inside your own mind. So if you really pay attention to the sounds all around you, and for me, and I think for a lot of other people, almost a sense of multi-directional listening is really important. If you feel like you're listening in front of you and behind you and to the sides and even above and below, then that attitude of attentiveness really quiets the mind down. Or any kind of meditation where you're paying attention to a lot of stuff at the same time. I call this like full bandwidth attention. Often what people are doing when they're trying to meditate is they'll take some very small aspect of their breathing process, like just the touch of air flowing in and out of their airways, and they'll try to focus on that, which is great, and that you can do that, and sometimes that will work, and with practice that will work. But the problem is you're not giving your mind very much to do. So there's a lot of internal bandwidth, as it were, still available. So nature abhorring a vacuum and all that kind of thing, or the mind abhorring a vacuum, you'll create things to do, you'll get distracted. But if, for example, if you're paying attention to your breathing and you're noticing, for example, that the belly is rising and falling, and that's not happening just on the front of your body, but it's happening on the sides, because those muscles on the belly run right around your sides. In fact, look, they go all the way around to the spine. So right now you're paying attention to much more. And then you're noticing that as these movements are happening, there's sensations changing on the skin. So now you're paying attention to a whole load of different stuff. And there's sensations deeper inside the abdomen. There's a growing sense of pressure as you breathe in, and there's a sense of relief as you breathe out. And this is just the abdomen we're paying attention to here. There's already enough going on there that your mind can... It's a bit of a stretch, actually. It's a kind of perceptual stretch to pay attention to all of this. And in doing that, and of course you can go further and further, you can do all this with the chest, you can notice that the arms are moving, the hands are moving, that there's changes in the sensations in your feet even as you're breathing in and out. You've now got a huge amount you can pay attention to. There's so much going on that it takes up all of your internal bandwidth, and you stop talking to yourself, so your mind starts becoming very calm. So anyway, this is a long-winded way of me saying you calm down your mind. You need to bring more attention into the body and learn to relax. As you relax the body, there's more of a sense of pleasure and energy. In fact, you notice that there's different sensations taking place over the body, in the body, as you breathe in and as you breathe out. So as you're breathing out, there's a sense of relaxation, which is, again, very good for calming the mind. But it's very good also for bringing about pleasurable sensations in the body, or helping you to sense pleasurable sensations in the body. And then as you pay attention to the breathing on the in-breath, and you can kind of feel your whole body beginning to change and be energized with the in-breath, it can be this really lovely sense of, tingly aliveness. So, you've got even more to pay attention to, and it's fun and it's enjoyable, noticing the body in this way. So that helps you to stay calm. So we're starting to get into a kind of feedback loop here. The calmness has helped you to be more aware of your body. Being aware of your body has helped you to sense this pleasurable flow of sensations as you're breathing in and breathing out, and that's helping you to stay calm. And then there's the kind of the joy element is the third part of it, where you're just enjoying all of this, basically. You're relaxing into the flow of it. It's all very cool. You might want to smile at this point. It's like sending a non-verbal communication into your being and sort of saying, this is good, this is okay, we're on top of this, there's nothing to worry about right now. All we have to do at the moment is just be and just enjoy being. And again, that feeds into a feedback loop, if you'll excuse that expression, because you're really beginning to enjoy yourself at this stage. The mind is no longer going off and thinking about this thing that you've got to do in the future, and maybe, or this thing that you said, and maybe that person won't like it, or none of that stuff is going on anymore. You're just really caught up in your own experience in a very positive way. And there may still be some thinking going on, but it tends to be very light, and you don't get caught up in it anymore. So yeah, that's you in jhana.
So is it? So let me just back up, because I will have to do confession here. Is I'm not doing meditation at all, right? And kind of never did it.
It's not a confession, mate. It's not a legal obligation.
No,
don't worry.
sorry.
We're not Catholic.
No,
we're
but at the same time,
Yeah.
I'm so drawn to that. And you mentioned, Tim, before that it wasn't popular in the late 70s or 80s, but today, you just, everyone wants to almost meditate. There's like this there's something which I feel like is missing, and people are drawn to these techniques, right? So you take somebody like me who doesn't know anything about meditation, and you just mentioned, I already forgot the name of this meditation technique that you just described, right? Because it's complex. And then you read that Google will practice mindfulness techniques of meditation, and you have so many names for around this. So how do you start? Where do you start? Somebody like me, where do we start?
There's lots of different ways that you can start. A lot of people these days begin by going to something like a mindfulness-based stress reduction class, because there's been this scientific validation, medical validation of meditation going back to the 70s, actually. And again, the researchers...
I was wrong with that as well, then.
Yeah.
I've pretty much been wrong with fucking everything I've said. If
No, you're not wrong at all.
I'm kidding.
When it was a guy called John Kabat-Zinn who started this back in the 70s, he'd been off to, I don't know, someplace, India, Thailand, somewhere, I'm not sure, and he learned to meditate there. And he was... it wasn't even his field, but... somehow he got into working with people who were coming along to his hospital who were experiencing a lot of pain and stress, a lot of physical pain and stress, and having real difficulty coping with the symptoms of their illnesses. And for some reason, he thought, okay, let's try doing meditation with them. But let's not call it meditation. We'll call it mindfulness-based stress reduction. And I think most people thought it was completely weird, and some people probably thought it was totally inappropriate. And he was very much in a minority position. But they started started finding it was working, and doing this as clinical trials, and finding out that it was actually extremely beneficial. And then that has become extended into working with things like depression, for example, You're working with eating disorders, and the whole thing's kind of exploded. Now, woof. So there's now there's hundreds of papers published every year, showing various benefits of meditation. It changes your brain, it makes your brain thicker, it slows down the aging in your brain, it has beneficial effects on pain and stress, etc., etc. So there's been all this medical validation of meditation, and so for a lot of people, their first introduction will be something like a mindfulness-based stress reduction class. But there's a ton of stuff out there. I mean, you can go to some online retailer and order a CD or download an MP3.
Like wildmind.org, something like that.
Well, I was trying not to mention Amazon actually, because I'm not buying stuff from Amazon these days for ethical reasons. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff available there. There's a bunch of stuff available on YouTube. Although to be honest, I haven't tried to go to YouTube and do a search, and I would imagine that you're probably going to find a lot of crap there. Along with the good stuff.
That's actually sorry to interrupt, but that was my worrying actually, because there's so many, even Tim wrote a book about.
I can answer this question really easily. Yeah. Sign up for one of Bodhi's courses. There you go. Do one of his courses online. The thing is, that was what made the difference to me. I've been using guided meditations, but the minute you feel like you're accountable to other people, I didn't want to be the person when he asked at the beginning, how's your practice gone this week? I didn't want to be the person that said, what practice? Yeah, whatever. Even if it went badly, I didn't mind. And also, when you're meditating with other people, to me, I didn't want to itch. I know they all got their eyes closed, nobody's looking at me, but I didn't even want to scratch myself. It kept me more disciplined doing that. Whereas before, I'm like, you know how hyper I am. In fact, the best piece of advice I've ever been given on meditation was from Bodhi, when I was talking about this or complaining about this. He said, if you actually focus in on an itch and actually make that part of your meditation and notice how it doesn't stay static, that it's moving, and you get curious about it, that you can actually, it doesn't give you the sort of frustration or grief or the desire to scratch it, or it lessens that. And that has made a huge difference to me. I regularly go through an entire 30-minute meditation without scratching myself. And before, I'd be like, I'd just be like, what's that guy look like? Epilepsy or something? I'm just trying to do meditation. So yeah, I think accountability is important. I'm sure there are people that just kick off, and do it from day one on their own or read or whatever. But that group setting and that almost sense of camaraderie as well, because you're all trying to do it together, and when you do that, you realise that everybody's got their own struggles with it, no matter how much they've done it or how long they've done it.
The ideal actually for that reason is meditating with other people. If you can find a local group that you can go to, that is really great, because when you're sitting with other people, there's very little possibility that after 5 or 10 minutes you're going to say, oh god, this is just not working, I'm going to go and watch TV instead,
Exactly,
but is it to me, like for me, is there like different techniques? Is it like something that you would be more, that would be more natural for you to go to? It depends on the techniques, or it will work better, or I have no clue, by the way, when I'm saying that.
Yeah, there's lots of different kinds of meditation. There's lots of different styles.
Can you explain them all, please?
Yeah, I'll explain them all. Yeah. The two that I recommend that everybody should do are, I've mentioned them both actually already. Mindfulness of breathing, which helps to calm the mind down and generally get us a bit more aware of the various processes that are going on within us, like how the mind stirs up our emotions and stirs up the body, etc. And loving kindness meditation, which is a way of working with your emotions so that you become more, kind basically. Usually it's called loving kindness meditation, but I think of it these days as just kindness meditation. So you're just becoming kinder to yourself.
Can you explain this one? I'm intrigued. Love and kindness.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because the last stage I think is brilliant.
Loving kindness rather than love and kindness. Right, how to explain this? Well, the way I think about it is that, the attitude that we have towards ourselves and toward other people, let's just take ourselves first, has a big effect on the quality of our well-being. If you're continually, beating yourself up and judging yourself and giving yourself a hard time and, worrying about whether you're going to be good at something or, comparing yourself to other people, you're going to end up pretty miserable, really. If you can be more kind and patient and accepting with yourself and recognize that you don't have to be perfect, that it's okay to mess up, to have a kind of basic attitude of kindness towards yourself, the way that you would relate to a friend, that kind of kind, supportive attitude. If you can have that quality of experience towards yourself, then you're going to be much happier. But you're also going to be happier if you can have that towards everybody that you meet. We can develop that toward our friends, and that's the way that the practice works. Is you start off by cultivating this attitude toward yourself, wishing yourself well, hoping that you become happier. Hoping is not a very good word actually, but kind of like in a way connecting with your own innate desire to be happier, recognizing that that's something that you want and valuing it. And then doing the same with a friend, somebody you already have a connection of kindness with. And then calling up somebody that you would normally just ignore. You just wouldn't think of them as being a feeling being. You go to the post office and, you ask for some stamps or something like that. You're in the supermarket and someone's, ringing up your groceries, and usually your mind is elsewhere and you don't think about them really as being a human being very much of the time. Unless something goes wrong, in which case you maybe get a bit annoyed with them. But just using those opportunities just to recognize, hey, this person in front of me is a feeling being. Their desire for happiness is just as real as my desire for happiness. Their feelings, their joy, their suffering is just as real to them as mine is to me. Then you have a different kind of connection with them. You automatically don't want to do anything that's going to cause that person unnecessary suffering. You automatically want to relate to them in a way that's going to give them a good experience of contact with another human being. So that's the third stage. It's called the neutral person. And then you make it really challenging. You cultivate this quality of kindness towards somebody you don't get on with, you're having some kind of difficulty with. This could be somebody that
mother-in-law.
It could be your mother-in-law. Actually, I like my mother-in-law. Well, actually, my ex-mother-in-law, I should say. It could be somebody that you actually get on with, that you love, a spouse, for example, or somebody that you work with that you basically like. But at that particular time, there's some conflict going on, or it might be somebody that you've got long-standing antipathy toward. There's some kind of long-standing conflict there. And you don't have to learn to like that person. You just have to learn to recognize that this is another struggling human being. We're all doing this, what I call this difficult thing of being human. We all want to be happy, and yet happiness is actually quite elusive. If you think about how much of the time you're actually really happy, really joyful, it's not really much of the time. If you start looking at the various forms of suffering that you experience in your life, just minor stress or feeling irritated by things or feeling frustrated or feeling bored.
Like a dog, for instance.
Yes. Feeling anxious, all of those kind of... If you just start noticing how much suffering there is in our lives, even in minor ways, how many suboptimal experiences that we're having, you realize it's actually a pretty damn difficult thing to be human. We want this happiness, we want well-being, we want peace, the different ways we can look at it. But it's actually pretty rare. So,
this is... Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, buddy. You took a breath.
No, Tim, let him speak.
Dangerous to do it.
Mindfully as well. Go on. Oh, do you want me to continue?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just going to finish by saying that, well, you're just recognizing that anyone that you're having difficulty with is in the same kind of situation. In fact, a lot of the difficulty that you're having with them is to do with the fact that they're trying to cope with their own suffering in one way, and you're trying to cope with your suffering in another way. And the way that they're trying to cope with their suffering is causing you suffering, and often the way you're trying to cope with your suffering is causing them suffering, and therefore you're in conflict with each other. But if you can get down to that level beneath the strategies that you're using to deal with your suffering, and just recognize that you're both suffering beings, then there's a chance of empathy developing, and therefore there's a chance of breaking out of the reactive patterns that are keeping the conflict in place.
And I love that you use the word strategies, because that was something I was going to say, because this is self-development 101. Yeah. This is basic what we do as coaches, because if I can't get a client to go easy on themselves to start with, it's going to be really difficult. I'll often say, look, you've got to be kind to yourself. The times I've said to clients, you're really tough on yourself, and they look at me like I'm a soothsayer or something. It's because nearly everybody is.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, well, does it work? And the answer usually is, well, no. I wouldn't be here if it worked. Well, let's look for another strategy then. And that strategy is being kind to yourself.
Right.
And, and it is hard. Yeah, I said, I like the Metta Bhavana is my favourite, loving kindness is my favourite meditation. And it's, I got ripped off recently by somebody on one of the training courses, didn't pay me. And it's somebody I know personally and gone out my way to help her. And I used her for like 2 or 3 weeks just to, and now I'm like sort of over it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Although I think the woman at the post office, if she knew how many times I'd sent her loving kindness, would probably ask to have me arrested. Because the first time you ever did it with me, you said the post office, so I immediately thought of this woman, I just go in there, but no.
I can see the restraining order on its way if she's listening to this podcast.
Exactly.
The interesting thing to me is that both of those strategies that you're describing, the strategy of beating yourself up and giving yourself a hard time, and the strategy of being kind toward yourself, they come from the same fundamental underlying motivation, which is that we want to be happy. But exactly. It's just that, a lot of us have unfortunately learned the idea that the way to be happy is to punish yourself. Punish yourself for doing things wrong, and then you'll stop doing things wrong. But it doesn't really work very well, because we're always doing things wrong. You can't not do things wrong. So you're just continually punishing yourself. You never get to the point where you can sort of say, okay, I can stop punishing myself now because I'm good enough. Because you're always going to find fault.
Yeah, and I think that's just, it's how we're brought up, isn't it? You think about school, about the fact that your errors are always highlighted. Pretty much. Your parents, they get mad at you when you've done something wrong. So it's just like learned behaviour. It'd be interesting, to see somebody brought up where that never happened. I'm sure there are occasions where that doesn't, and people are kind to themselves, but. Go on. You sound like you want to say something, Olivier.
No, two things. Regarding this failure. It's not recognized. Failures is failures. In our societies. And I remember my time in school actually, and I was traumatized actually in school. I can say it very, very honestly, because it was you needed to be the best. You need to have a high, good papers and good grades and all this stuff. And we all dreading when the teacher will come back with the grades, and it will start from the up to the bottom of the grades, when it will come back to the, and you just see yourself, oh shit, and shit. And it was like humiliation, you were humiliated. You were humiliated, you were not good enough, you didn't do enough work, and you had at the bottom. This is how I was brought up. Try to be the best. So that's just to. But the second thing I wanted to say is I can listen to you for hours. What is it about you? When I say you, it's very maybe generic view, but like Jack Canfield, for instance, I can listen to him for hours and hours. You make so much sense. There's like. Shit, that's it. This is what you say. Makes sense. It appeals to me. It's people needs to listen to that, and maybe it's not a surprise that now more and more people are drawn to that, to this Buddhism, right? Because that's another question that I wanted to ask. I'm sorry, but I'm very messy, but I'm okay with that. I'm very messy with the way that I'm thinking.
Okay. You haven't got beer in your hand. You've only got beer in your hand.
I don't have. It's another scandalous thing that's happening in France. It's 1st of May, so all the shops are closed. Nobody's working.
Oh my God! In Florida, there was a headline: "Woman stabs man with squirrel." One of the greatest headlines I've ever. And and that was because her husband had gone out on Christmas Eve and all the stores were closed and he couldn't get any beer, so she'd stabbed him with it. It was a ceramic squirrel. But anyway, just remember, not really that. Now that was about as random as you can get. Yeah, so carry on as my. And I have no clue what I was coming. You couldn't get beer. We're on a lack of beer.
No, I was saying that I was very messy in my thought process because I had this question about myself. You're a Buddhist, right? And you teach meditation. Buddhism is is it a religion? Yeah, it's a religion because there's also this what's happening behind that, the reincarnation and all this stuff, right? But it's also a philosophy of life, right? But can you be not a Buddhist and teach meditation? Because most of the time it comes together. You see what my point is?
You should have fucking Wikipedia'd it first. but I'll let everybody answer. Yeah, go on, carry on.
Fuck you.
I get what you're saying, and I don't think you have to identify as being a Buddhist for any of this stuff to work.
Yeah.
And you don't even have to take on stuff like reincarnation, or we don't so much call it reincarnation in Buddhism as rebirth. I don't take on rebirth. It's not that I'm definite that it doesn't happen. It's just that I can't verify in my own experience that it does happen. If I definitely had some memories of a past life or something like that, I could say, I have absolute proof that this happens. I can remember who I was, and I've been back to the house, and it was exactly as I remember it, and all that kind of stuff. But I don't. I had a few dreams a few years ago about dying in a particular way, and a friend helped me look up some of the details, and we found a record of somebody, it was in New Zealand, dying the way that I'd remembered, as it were, in the dream. And as soon as I heard this person's name, which was a Scottish name, I thought of a particular small town in the northeast of Scotland called Stonehaven. And I went to this was in the days before the internet was a thing. And I went to the local library where they had all of the telephone directories for Scotland. And I started looking for this surname in the telephone directories. And I found that almost every single one of the people who had this last name was from this small town in Scotland, Stonehaven. So that's possible. But on the other hand, I had been to Stonehaven once as a child. So maybe I saw a shop with that particular name. It's amazing what the mind can file away. And so perhaps I saw that name, in this newspaper report of somebody, dying. It was in a train crash, and perhaps my brain just plucked from 20 years before this memory of having seen this shop without remembering that I'd seen it, and I just made that association. So I don't know, So to me, it's a completely open thing. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. I'm not going to say it does. And in fact, the Buddha was asked about this once, and most Buddhists tend to ignore this, but he said he made the Buddhist equivalent of Pascal's wager, because Pascal said, of course, you should believe in God, because if God does exist, then he's going to be really happy, and if he doesn't exist, you haven't lost anything. I like, of course, Homer Simpson's wager, which is what if I'm worshipping the wrong God? He's going to be really, the right God's going to be really pissed off. So it's probably best not to worship any of them. The Buddhist version of this was that if you don't believe in rebirth, but you do the kind of practices that he's asking, then if rebirth exists, you're going to have a good rebirth, and if rebirth doesn't exist, then you're going to have a good life. And so he was kind of saying, it's not really essential to believe, any of that stuff. And so, I don't. Well, it's not that I don't believe it, but I don't have any belief in it or belief against it. It doesn't seem very likely to me, but, we live in a really weird world, a really weird universe with, quantum entanglement and all kinds of stuff. And so,
listen, Deepak Chopra's got quantum mechanics.
That's
the law of attraction, so we don't need to worry about that.
Yeah.
But I just want to add as well that Bodhi comes from a scientific background. Didn't you train to be a vet?
I did.
Am I right in saying so?
I did, yeah.
Do you think that analytical sort of training makes you more, less likely to just go with it because that's what people think, or that, you know, for you to have to break things down and want to know scientifically why something works or doesn't work?
Yeah, I do like to understand how things work. I mean, a lot of medicine is understanding particular pathways and how something comes into being and what you can do about it. And in fact, the Buddha's one of the Buddha's teachings, the Four Noble Truths, is supposed to be based on an ancient medical formula, which is that first of all, you've got your diagnosis, which in his case is that we suffer, and then you've got to look for a cause for that. So the cause in our lives, according to the Buddha, is that we do a lot of craving, particularly craving for things being other than they actually are. And then there's the prognosis, which in this particular case is the full health of awakening, that we can actually, it's possible to be psychically healthy. And then there's the treatment, which is the Buddha's path of meditation, living ethically, looking very closely at your life, etc., which is encapsulated in the Eightfold Path, but it's more of a principle than a particular list. So yeah, the Buddha seemed to have this mind. I think of it as being almost like an engineer. He wanted to understand how things worked, so that you could engage creatively with the way our lives operate, and bring our lives in the direction that we want them to go in.
You mentioned awakening, and I believe Buddha. Does it mean Buddha awakening? I think there is something about it.
The word Buddha means awakened or awakened one.
Can you what is that? Because I hear this word a lot. I suddenly awaken. Is it what is there like a particular?
Yeah, it does. It's difficult to explain. In fact, fundamentally, it's impossible to explain. The Buddha said that the nature of reality was beyond the possibility of concepts to explain, and in fact, everything's like that. I mean, the classic, taste of a strawberry or something like that. You can describe that to somebody else. You can say, "Oh, this tastes like strawberries," and they'll know what you're talking about if they have tasted a strawberry. But if they've never tasted a strawberry, they won't know. So our ordinary everyday communication is always pointing to experiences. The language that we use is always pointing to experiences, but can't encapsulate those experiences, and other people can only understand you if they've had the same experience as you, or a similar experience. But the trouble is with awakening is that unless you've experienced awakening, there's no way to actually describe that. But I mean, fundamentally, what it is, it's about breaking free of certain delusions that we have. One of these delusions is that we have some kind of a separate and permanent self, and most people are going to hear that and think, well, of course I've got a self. I'm here, I exist. But it's not saying that we don't exist. It's just saying that the kind of self that we assume that we have is not the kind of self that we actually have. And the kind of self that we assume that we have, it's almost like we imagine that there's a mini me inside of our head who's receiving all of these inputs coming in and who's making evaluations about how to respond, and then it's sending out commands, and making us act in various ways. And we don't have that kind of a self. And the problem is that as soon as we think we've got that kind of a self, we have to think, well, what kind of self do I have? Precisely, what kind of self do I actually have? And you look at your life, and it's kind of messy, and there's suffering and stress, and you get depressed and stuff like that from time to time, and you always imagine that other people's lives are better than your life, and so you think, well, kind of self I got is pretty crap actually. It's not very good. It's kind of broken. Maybe I'll never be able to do this enlightenment thing. So anyway, the Buddha's kind of helping us to look more closely at what we're actually like, and you realize that what we are is very complex. It's not it's not definable. It's not unitary either. We have a self which it's more like a committee, a fairly dysfunctional community. Someone got a truck going nearby.
Is it your team again?
Is there a big
motorbike?
Big
The guy around the corner's got a motorbike and he loves to ride it round and round.
Can you take him again?
No, he's way bigger than me, mate. He's an ex-marine, so I think I'll just wave hi.
Anyway, when you start to realise that you're actually a committee rather than a single being, you start to take things less seriously because you realise that a lot of stuff is going on inside you which you're not consciously doing anyway. You don't consciously give rise to your thoughts most of the time. You never do. You only think that you're consciously giving rise to your thoughts. And so you stop taking your thoughts so seriously. You don't consciously give rise to your emotions. You don't consciously decide you're going to get upset about something. It just happens. And you realise, all this stuff is just happening inside me. I don't have to take it quite so seriously. And you start to lose this sense of having a fixed, permanent self that's flawed. Anyway, this is just the beginning of it. There's a sense of separation, a sense of separateness that we have, that somehow we are completely separate from those around about us, and you can kind of relax into kind of a broader awareness that we almost like co-create each other. We interpenetrate each other. Sorry to sound all sexual there.
My God, I shocker, Buddhist talks about penetration on podcasts.
Let's go there.
At least we've got the headline.
We have now it. Sex and Buddhism, the scandal.
We're having a threesome right now. But actually, in a kind of an ontological sense, we are having a threesome right now. I mean, Olivier, there's some representation of me inside your consciousness, right now. The same with Tim.
And it's awesome.
You're well, thank you. But I've had this representation of you in my experience as well, and your words, your body language, etc., is actually it's having an effect on who I am. Who I am is dependent upon you. How I am right now is having an effect on you. You're the manifestation of Olivier-ness and Timness is changing depending on the kind of communications we're having with each other.
I want to hug you all now.
It's interesting.
I like
you
being
just made me think of something. First of all, I've got to say, because Olivier said it's a religion. I'm pretty sure I'm saying it's not a religion, Buddhism. It's more philosophy. But I just, in case anybody was listening and got confused, or confused that I had an opportunity to put you down and didn't use it. Basically, that's what I didn't want anybody to be confused about. By the way, he never normally wears glasses. But I just want to ask you about, because the advances in neuroplasticity and the way we now start to understand the brain. I mean, things like mirror neurons, so that when somebody may stub the toe, we now know there's an area in our brain, or there's these mirror neurons that trigger us that sense of empathy, that automatic sense of empathy that we actually sort of flinch, in the way that when people are in. People who despise each other but can be sort of brought together by a natural disaster. Now suddenly, empathy is really, I think it's natural in it. I think we train ourselves out of it. Yeah. But really what I wanted to ask you is, obviously meditation is exploding. If you can get, if you'd have told me 10 years ago I'd be meditating, I would have just probably walked away for your own good, feeling like you must be insane. So it's exploding, but a lot of it is not. I wouldn't say not necessarily for the right reasons. I don't want to say that, but I suppose the question I wanted to ask is: do you get frustrated by the commercialization of meditation and the fact that so many people are now jumping? I was on Twitter the other day, and a woman said, "Buy my new book, just out, my new ebook on Amazon, £4.99. Be here now." And I'm like, fuck. I emailed her back. I said, Ram Dass might have something to say about that. I know you can call a book whatever you want. You can't trademark a book. But who, talk about jumping on, the bandwagon. So anyway, do you think just getting meditation out there is a good thing no matter how it happens? I mean, I suppose I think you're going to say yes to that, but does it frustrate you?
I think yeah, you're right. I think it's a good thing that meditation is out there, even if people are going and spending many hundreds of dollars on doing a mindfulness-based stress reduction class, where they could just go around the corner to the humble little Buddhist meditation teacher and learn much the same thing. I get a little jealous actually sometimes. It's not easy. I mean, I hate to say that I make my living as a meditation teacher. I sort of do. I mean, all of the events that I'm doing currently are by donation. I'm not selling any events. I'm not selling any meditation courses. I offer the meditation courses if people want to do them for nothing, and it varies. Sometimes half of the people want to do it for take a course. They perhaps benefit from it, or maybe they don't. I don't know, but they decide not to give it anything. But the 50% or so that do, that's great. But I mean, basically, I kind of scrape by. This is the start of the month. I wasn't sure whether I was going to be able to pay myself at the beginning of this month. Fortunately, I was able to do that. I had a little bit of an influx, but it's a bit stressful, and I get a little jealous of the fact that if you say that you're doing mindfulness-based stress reduction and go out and charge people $400 or $500 for doing that.
I've seen $2,000 plus.
Right.
And I've got to say this. I've got to come in and say, because I think what you're doing is fundamentally wrong. There you go. I've said it. And I'll tell you for why. Because I get the intention. We're giving away How to Be Rich and Happy. We wanted to do that because we wanted to get it to people that couldn't afford it. But the one thing I've found over the last 4 or 5 years is it's all about perceived value. And when people get stuff for free, it's not always the case. I know there are examples. But so a woman came to me and said, "Can I come on your training for free, the life coach training?" She said, "I honestly couldn't pay you $5 if you asked me to pay you that." And I said, "If you can't pay me $5, then you can't afford to be a life coach, because it's a business that runs itself." Now, you're offering massive value to people. Now, if you've got somebody that's homeless or whatever, yeah, by all means. But I don't believe anybody can't afford, $10 or whatever. And I just think if you've got people that are doing it for free, I bet you any money they're the highest dropout, the most likely to drop off the course.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
they're not invested in it as much. And I think in some respects you've got a duty of care to say to people, this has real value. This has real value. It is super nice to say to people, I'm going to I do pro bono coaching, but I would never advertise it. Never. I do it when I spot a case and it's somebody that I really want to help that person because they're in desperate straits. If somebody phones me up, I almost always turn them down. But if I said I was doing that, I'd just get inundated with people that just want stuff for free. And I think, so I think you'd be helping yourself more. And I also think you'd be helping the people that were doing it, that you're getting people on it that, are prepared. If nobody's prepared to pay $10 to do a 4-week, cut or whatever, come on. I mean, how serious are they about making any changes in their life? There aren't many people in this day and age that couldn't come up with that money to do something that's so important. So I'm sorry if that sounds like I'm not criticising you, because I know your intentions are fantastic. But I also want to see you get the success that you deserve, that I see other people getting, that aren't as good at what you do as what you do.
I hear a lot of the things that you're saying about, for example, how serious are you about, making these changes in your life if you're not even prepared to, pony up $10 or whatever. But the way I think about that is that, that's really good language to use in encouraging people to make donations. Because I think there is something important about what I'm doing, which is I'm trying to create community. And I don't think you can really create a community that's based on commerce. You create like a customer base, basically, a client base, which is a good thing to do. I mean, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But I'm trying to create something that is a bit more kind of, free-flowing than that. So there's been times, for example, when we've had a financial crisis in Wildmind, and I've just sent out a pitch saying, look, we're having real difficulties. We need to, get a certain amount of money, $5,000 or whatever it is, before the end of the month if we're going to keep going next month. And people have responded. It's been really beautiful. You can't really do that with a customer base, and I think there's something quite beautiful about that. It's more of a community. That's kind of what I'm aiming for.
I agree. I understand what you're saying. I fully do, and I just think it's my personal experience. I do think, I'm very, very protective of my newsletter list. I'm not pushing product on them all the time. I'm not trying to sell stuff all the time. And I think you can still build up a community. I know people that have done it. Look at somebody like Seth Godin, who's got this massive loyal tribe, but they still go out and pay for his books and what have you, and they don't resent that because it's a win-win. It's a trade of value, And I know, I just think you can have a community with people that are prepared to support the community. So if somebody is in there who's got plenty of money and they're taking free meditation, then they're not really supporting the community anyway.
No,
really.
That's true. But on the other hand, they may be opening themselves up to doing that in the future, and I don't want to exclude people on the basis that right now they're not quite ready. I would rather get them through the door. I just want to emphasize one other thing as well. That we made the mistake last year of running online events and saying they're free but donations are welcome, which was really dumb because we set up they're free and that's all people hear. So this year we've been very, very careful to say that our events are by donation. And when people are signing up for them, the very first thing that they're invited to do is to make a donation. And then if they click on the little link that says, I don't want to make a donation right now, they're actually taken to another page where they're asked again, are you sure? Because,
I'm sure, and then we're really hard selling bastard, and then another page.
No. We just do it twice. But, so I think we're still working with this. This is definitely an area that we're working on and that we're aware of and, probably have more work to do. And, maybe we'll decide it's not a good way to go in the future. But, I mean, basically, I'd say we're more than halfway. We're 90% of the way, actually, to flourishing using the model that we're doing, that we're using at the moment. We're 90% of the way there. All we need is either a slightly higher percentage of people who are participating to give, or more people to participate in our events in the first place, because both of those result in an increase in donations. So I don't think we're failing at what we're doing. I think we're making progress toward being really successful. I would love to be in the position where I'm operating out of a sense of abundance. Right now, it's like operating out of a sense of just squeaking through month to month. But I do want to get there. But I'd like to do that by pursuing this, donations model a bit further and getting better at doing it.
Have you've read some Dan Ariely? I'm guessing, have you? Predictability.
Yeah. I haven't read him. I've seen a couple of TED Talks or whatever that he's done.
His books are fantastic. But I don't know if you've got this on you, but if you put something along the lines of most people donate this amount, people hate to be like the person that then doesn't do that. You know what I mean? It's like, put a donation, what do you want to leave? And then people, it's like John Cleese in Faulty Towers, like something about the people that always buy the second cheapest bottle of wine, because they don't want to be seen to be buying the cheapest. But when you do that, tell most people give this, it's like, well, if most people give that, I better give that or whatever, But anyway, we shouldn't be talking marketing. And like I say, it's absolutely not a criticism. I want you to be flourishing because of
I love you for that, Tim. I love you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So much love here.
It is.
This is beautiful.
The hairs on the back of I haven't got many hairs on me. And anywhere my body, to be quite honest.
It's the only place that you have hair, Tim.
The hair on the back of my head just almost.
But I love your answer, Buddy, because it's you offer this sense about community, not customer base. It's so different. It's so not what we hear today in every day. So building a community, it's. I think this is something which will set the world. That's my own belief, to be honest.
Well, I was wrong on that one as well, man.
I just want to emphasize we do sell stuff as well. We have an online store and we sell meditation MP3s and we sell books and we sell meditation jewelry and stuff like that, just to bring more money in and support what we're doing in terms of meditation and making our website available to people. So it's not entirely that we avoid commerce, but in terms of the teaching that we're doing, as much as possible, we're trying to make that by donation.
Cool. I know we're coming to the end now, but just tell people about the community on G+, do you want to? I mean, we'll put a link in, but because that's a great way for people to get support if they are unsure what to do.
Yeah, well, sure. Well, first of all, there's wildmind.org, which is my main website. That's where I do, most of my teaching. Actually, it's not really. It's my public website, where there's a lot of information about meditation. And there are some structured guides to various meditation practices that you can work your way through with guided meditations and all that kind of stuff. And we also have a blog there, so there's a constant stream of articles coming out, what's happening on the news in terms of meditation and recent thoughts that I've been having. You can also find out about the events that we're running there, because actually that's where most of my teaching is happening at the moment. And those events are generally by email, so people sign up for basically a 1 month email subscription list by donation. And there's readings which may be daily or they may be 3 times a week, and there's links to guided meditations and all that kind of stuff. And then I'm a big fan of Google+. I really like the way Google+ is set up. And we have a community on Google+ as well. So if you're a member if you use Google+, you can do a search for Wild Mind, and you'll find our kind of like public page, which is just a list of posts and stuff like that. But we also have a community. If you notice under the communities heading, you'll find us there too. So feel free to shoot us a link and ask to join. It's a private community, just so that people can have discussions without worrying about who's going to be reading it. Right. And it's incredibly supportive.
It is.
I find it quite extraordinary. I'm also very grateful of the fact that there's a lot of people in Europe who are up a good 5 or 6 hours before I am. So I wake up in the morning and I look, and there's someone been having this real crisis in their life, and there's a whole bunch of people who've already pitched in and responded very compassionately and very, very helpfully as well. So by the time I get up, the work's all done. It's fantastic. I just have to chip in at the end. And say, what those guys said.
1+ it. Just click on the 1+. Yeah.
The community kind of takes care of itself. Great.
Yeah, it is cool. I must admit, I don't go in. I don't go in very often, simply because I forget. But whenever I go in there, the support of each other, it's just like it is fantastic. You should do a free model, I think, because this community, you might have something with this whole community thing. Before I say, do you want to? Olivier is just shaking his head in disgust or just confusion or whatever. Do you want to add anything, mate, before we wrap this up?
No, I really loved it. Actually, I'm always so amazed by people who went there, who have this practice in themselves, and the way that you express yourself, it touches you. Really, that you have this energy of this. That's really, impacted me. I've just listened to you and everything. I agreed with everything that you said, and really, I almost like you convinced me. I will buy something from your website, by the way.
There you go.
You come and take an event and not pay for it.
I understood it's all about money. I will buy something.
Yeah, bloody Buddhist. That's all.
Thank you, Olivier. It's touching to hear you say that.
Thank you very much.
Listen, thanks a lot for coming on. I really appreciate it. I encourage anybody to go and check the site out and do the retreat I did with him was great. As you can tell from this, he's got a great sense of humour as well, which sometimes is missing from, I don't necessarily mean Buddhism, but certainly missing from right-wing Christianity. So there you are. I had to get in a dig at somebody before the end. Yeah. So thanks a lot, buddy. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Bye.
Right.
Okay. Well, I'm starving, guys. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, sorry we ran over, man.
It's 1:30 now, and I haven't had lunch, so I'm going to have to fill myself with hummus.
Neither have I. So I'm empathetically feeling that, because I haven't had lunch yet either. So, yeah. Thanks. Good to see you again.
Yeah, it's great. I really love talking to you guys.
Okay. So disappointed that, I'll tell you what, we'll get you back. But when we've got some listeners and it's going to be worth your while, we're going to do.
I went out to Texas with love.